right, everybody, this is your characteristics of life notes for Unit 1. And we're going to kind of look at what life really is. How do you know that something is living? How do you know that something is characterized by having all of those little elements to make it a living thing? Let's start with biology, because really what we're doing in this class in biology is we are studying life. So we break down the word bio. This first part of the word bio means life. And logi, or logos, a form of that word, means study of. So we're literally studying life in this class, but in order to study life, we have to know what are all the things that something has to have in order for it to actually be living, for us to be able to call it living and to have life. So there are very kind of strict things here about this that we're going to look at. But in order to study biology, we need to ask, what is life? And I don't really want to say strict, but some pretty common characteristics that we are going to take a look at. Scientists like to have everything fairly clear and defined so that all scientists around the world understand and all know what we're talking about. Because when we come from different places around the world, it's easy for us to say one thing in English, but then maybe somewhere in France, scientists could be studying something and maybe that has a different meaning from English in French. Or maybe something else is being studied in Germany, and now what we consider something to have maybe some sort of a qualitative observation that we've made, a qualitative component to it, it might be understood differently in another country like maybe Germany. So we have these lists of characteristics that are clearly understood by scientists pretty much everywhere, and they help us to determine if an object is considered living or non-living. And we have this little mnemonic that we use in this class. It's kind of a nice way to help you to remember the characteristics of life, but we use dog's reach. And I know that sounds kind of funny because dogs can't really reach for things, sort of. Well, they can, but they can't. But it's kind of a nice little way, if you can remember dog's reach, maybe some of these characteristics will at least pop into your head, and you'll be familiar enough with them that you'll get them right come test time next week. So we're looking at the first one. The letter D stands for DNA, meaning that all living things have to be made up of DNA. So our genetic code is DNA that we have, and all living things have DNA for their genetic code. For O, our O stands for organization. And all living things have to be organized from the smallest structure to larger structures. We grow from there. But there is a form of organization for all living things. All living things have to grow, so there's growth. Sometimes they grow big, like when you start off as a baby and you grow into an adult. You definitely can see the growth there. Sometimes growth really isn't much different between a new organism and an older organism of the same species. So growth can look different for different species. Our S in dog's reach, S is a stimulus response. Now, some of you even saw this with your isopods, where maybe you got one isopod and you thought, oh, it's not doing anything, it's just laying there. And then when you picked it up or you touched it or you moved your Petri dish, it started to wiggle its legs and you could see some movement there. So it was responding to you adding a stimulus to it, to that touch, and it was able to start moving from there. We can respond to stimuli in a lot of different ways, and we'll go over that as well. Our R in dog's reach is reproduce. All living things reproduce. And we'll go through all of these in more detail here in just a sec too. The E is for energy. The A is for adapt. And by adapting, I'm going to put in parentheses evolve, because I think a lot of times people see this E and they think it's evolve, but it's energy. We have to consume things for us as humans, and that's how we get our energy. Plants create their own energy, but either way, energy has to be used in living things. But adapting or evolving just means that we are making these changes over very, very long periods of time. So over a really long period of time in the history of humans, at one point in time, we really needed our tonsils or our appendix for things. And then over time, you didn't really need them for anything. They can be useful, they can be not useful and do nothing for you. And sometimes they can even cause infections for you and actually cause you to be in a great deal of pain, and they need to be removed. So why is it that we were born with and used these different parts, these different organs and these different tissues in our bodies, but then over a really long period of time, now there's no use for them. So that's kind of what we're looking at there for that part. The C is cells. Everything is made up of cells. And then the H is homeostasis. And we'll go through each of these. Dog's reach: DNA, organization, growth, stimulus response, reproduce, energy, adapt, cells, and homeostasis. We'll go through each of those in a little bit more detail. And we're going to spend a lot of time over the course of this whole school year learning about all of these things as well. So DNA, all living things have to pass on their genetic material in one form or another. And for them to be classified as living, it's got to be in the form of DNA. So DNA is crucial for having essentially our instructions for how to build us or any other living organism, how that living organism is built, and how it's going to carry out its processes to maintain its life. And those instructions, that code, that blueprint has to get passed on to the offspring in order for offspring to continue to know how to be able to live and go through life. With organization, living things are organized. I kind of feel like that one sounds a little bit redundant, but maybe it'll hit home a little bit more and we'll remember it a little bit more. All structures have a function. So, and when you're looking at even something small like an isopod, all of those tiny little structures within the isopod, they all have a function. They all are necessary for the isopod to carry out life and to live on a daily basis. Same thing for humans. So when we look at things at the smallest level here. So the molecules are definitely at the smallest level of organization. Now, that doesn't mean that they are alive. It's just that we need those molecules to build things like our cells. So the cells are built from molecules, and the cell is actually the smallest unit of life that we can have. From there, we can have lots of cells come together and they can build tissues. And then when we have lots of tissues come together, those build organs. And then when we have organs come together, they can build organ systems. And then I think the last one probably ended up on the back. We'll find out here. But then the biggest thing is an organism, like us, humans. We are built up of lots of organ systems. If you think about your digestive system, your circulatory system, all of those good ones. So this would be our biggest structure of organization would be organisms, which are us. Okay, I'll give you a second, and then we're going to flip our papers over. And if you missed something or this was going too fast for you, this is going to be posted on Schoology for the rest of the semester. So feel free to go back and rewatch this on your own to fill in anything that you may have missed. Or if you just want to get a better understanding and listen to it again, then there you go. All right, so growth. We made it through D-O, DNA, organization. Now we're on our G, dog's reach. The G for growth, all living organisms have to grow, but not necessarily in the way that we think of growing, like especially with humans, how you just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So there are two types of growth in biology and life that we can see. There is cell division, and that's when you get maybe something like a little paper cut on your finger. And when you get that paper cut, those cells get damaged and your body has to repair those cells. So your cells are going to, the healthy cells that are around that paper cut, they're going to start increasing in number by dividing. And so when our cells grow and then divide and grow and divide and grow and divide and grow and divide and make new cells, that's what we're talking about here for growth. But then also, we're talking about cell enlargement here, where some cells are not going to divide and they are just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And that's what growth can look like for them. For the S in stimulus response, all living organisms, again, have to respond to stimuli. Stimuli is the plural version of the word, or plural form of the word stimulus. So lots of different stimuli can affect living organisms, and when they do, they should be responding to that. A stimulus, or multiple would be stimuli, but a stimulus is an internal or external factor in the environment that causes a response. So this could be something like temperature. So when you guys are at the football games on Friday nights and now it's starting to finally cool off, well, it was cooling off, now it's getting warmer. But when it does cool off, when the sun goes down, it does get a little bit cooler. And then, as we move on into the fall, into October here, those Friday night games are going to get really cold. So what do you do when you're at those Friday night games? You usually huddle together with your friends. You usually shiver and you're moving. Maybe you're pacing. Maybe you're just kind of stomping your feet a little bit or picking them up and kind of marching in place. And you do that to try to get warm. And that's a response to a temperature change or a stimulus from the temperature. When the lights are off, like if we're watching a video in class and the lights go off for the video, and then at the end of the period, it's time to go and the lights get flicked on. And a lot of you respond to that stimulus by closing your eyes or shrieking, no, stop, I wasn't ready for that. Or, oh, that was so bright. So that's another response to stimulus from light. Same thing for sound. If you hear a loud noise, all of a sudden, you may kind of jerk and turn your head and look back to see where that noise was coming from in the classroom. For pain, a lot of times we'll wince in pain. Again, paper cuts, great example. Nobody likes paper cut, but sometimes you don't know that they're there. You go to get hand sanitizer on your way out of the classroom, and then you feel that pain, that stinging sensation. So you kind of wince and go, ooh, ow, and all of that good stuff. Hunger, another way that we respond to a stimulus there for humans, our tummies growl. So if your tummy is growling now, that is your body's way of responding to that stimulus, and you need to eat something. Just don't do it in class because we're not supposed to eat in class. So make sure you eat on your way to the next class. Okay, moving on. Reproduction for R. So dogs, we made it through S. Now we're on reach, R, reproduction. Living organisms can reproduce in one of two ways, either asexually or sexually. And with asexual reproduction, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but asexual reproduction means that the organism is going to kind of go through what we would think of as cloning. It does make a copy of itself. Sometimes budding happens, and we'll see examples of this with different types of organisms. Root propagation is another one, with the roots spreading, and then another something kind of sprouting up from the roots. Or even self-fertilization. A lot of different organisms do this. You see this with a lot of plants with self-fertilization. So we'll go through a lot of different examples of this, and you guys will see what different organisms do based on their classification. And then there's sexual reproduction, which is going to involve an egg and a sperm. E for energy. All living things are going to use energy in a process called metabolism. So we have to metabolize. Metabolism. We have to metabolize that energy. This is the sum, or the addition, sum of all chemical processes that occur in an organism. So once we take in that food, how do we break it down? Where does that energy go? There's actually a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to make energy, and that's one thing that we'll learn about probably closer to December, heading into the break there. But a lot of that costs energy just to make energy. And so the metabolism, the way that we do that is what we are talking about here with energy. But all living organisms do have a metabolism. They have to metabolize energy, use that energy to sustain their life. And then we move on to adaptations, where living things have adaptations or traits. Adaptations or traits that make them well suited for their environment. So again, tonsils were said to help with fighting off infections. So whenever we had an infection that was ingested, essentially, I guess you could say, those tonsils would help to trap infections. And the little nodules, if you've never seen tonsils, they're kind of like golf balls, sort of, in a sense, if you want to think of that, where you could trap things in the little divots of like a golf ball, what a golf ball would look like. And that was useful, but now our immune systems have changed and adapted over time, where we're getting better at recognizing foreign things that come into the body and then fighting them. And the tonsils aren't really necessary for that. So now they can actually cause more problems if they are constantly getting infected and they're not getting rid of those infections, but just trapping them and keeping them there, so then they can get enlarged. And then that's when you are at the doctor having them removed. But at one point in time, they were well suited for our environment. Maybe now they're just not. So we've adapted over the years for that. Adaptive traits are passed on to future generations. And so some of you might say, well, if that's the case, then why do we still have the tonsils? If they're not needed anymore, why wouldn't we pass on that trait of not needing them? Because this has to happen over a super long period of time, and we haven't been around long enough for that to happen yet. So, or for us to not need them. And who knows, maybe we'll need them sometime in the future again. You never know. But as of right now, it's not something that we've permanently gotten rid of. It's not a trait that we have not coded for anymore, because it's still kind of useful, or it hasn't been enough time that has passed in the grand scheme of things for that to be necessary to not have anymore. So there's that part. Cells, smallest unit of life. Nothing can be smaller. The smallest unit of life. Nothing can be smaller, if it's a living organism, than a cell. And we're made up of trillions of cells, so there's a lot going on for a human body. And it's crazy to think that only one cell could sustain life and be considered living, and that's really the truth of it. So all living things are, oops, we don't need this word either. We're going to get rid of it. All living things are organized into cells. Living organisms are either multicellular, meaning that we're made up of lots of them, like humans. So that's not the right word. There's an extra C in there. I don't know what I just did. Multicellular. Get rid of that. There we go. So living organisms are either multicellular, made up of many cells, or they're unicellular, like bacteria. And we're going to look at both this semester, actually. You'll get to see them under the microscope. Cells are specialized and grouped by their function, which allows us to kind of play into the organization part of this. And all, like, let's say all skin cells. Oh, hold on a minute. There goes my light in the classroom. Oh, hold on. There we go. Let's see if I stay in one spot, it doesn't think that I'm here, but I'm here. So we're back. Okay, so where was I at with the specialization of cells? Oh, so all skin cells are going to have the function of particular skin cells, and they're going to function differently from the cells that make up your heart, or the cells that make up the lining of your small intestine, or the lining of your stomach. All of those things are very different and have different uses and different needs and have to survive in different environments. And so they all have special functions to be able to do that. And strangely enough, all of them still contain all of your DNA, the same DNA. And that's also a really cool concept to think about when you think about that stuff. Okay, homeostasis. Homeostasis means that all living things maintain a constant, stable environment, and I'm going to abbreviate environment because I'm running out of room. Oh, back up. Internal environment. Internal is a really key word here. So internal environment. For us, for example, when we get really hot, we need to cool ourselves down, so we sweat. Which is why if you've got a fever and you're really extremely hot, you will oftentimes shiver. And it's not because you're cold, because really your body is hot, but that shivering is going to help you to release that heat or to release that sweat to help cool down that internal temperature. We also have to regulate water. So if we're dehydrated, sometimes we hold on to what water we do have, and maybe you get swollen a little bit. We also regulate our pH. There are lots of things that we regulate internally. But homeostasis, a very key component to life. Homeostasis is our state of biological balance. Many responses are an effort to reach homeostasis, and that's just because if we're not balanced and regulated internally, it's really hard to carry out functions of life. And then we also see crazy things like protein denaturation and other stuff, and then nothing starts to work. But we'll get into that stuff too later on down the road with all of the stuff that we're going to learn this year. So those are your notes on characteristics of life. All living things have to have all of these characteristics. You have to have all of them. You can't just have most of them or all but one. They've got to have all of them. So keep that in mind as you proceed through this unit with studying and with doing assignments. You do need to have, or an organism needs to have all of these different characteristics in order to be considered living.